coming up on Philosophy Talk.
The future of the Negro in this country is precisely as bright or as dark as the future of the country.
James Baldwin and social justice.
I'm terrified at the moral apathy, the death of the heart, which is happening in my country.
According to Baldwin, white Americans are in deep denial about black grievances.
Because they're clinging to self-justifying myths about their own virtue and benevolence.
These people have deluded themselves for so long that they really don't think I'm human. And this means that they have become, in themselves, moral monsters.
What will it take to achieve social justice?
Is truth really so dangerous?
Our guest is Christopher Freeburg from the University of Illinois.
Baldwin, Truth, and Social Justice.
I can't be a pessimist.
Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Philosophy Talk.
Did you know that we've got a library of more than 600 other episodes over at our website?
Yeah, philosophytalk.org, we question everything.
Except your intelligence.
From Aristotle to Zhuangzi, from anarchy to Zen.
Become a subscriber today at philosophytalk.org.
Is it time for black people to turn the other cheek?
Or is it time for black people to rise up and rebel against the white power structure?
But aren't some whites innocent victims of the system too?
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor.
And I'm Deborah Satz, and we're here in the studios of KALW in San Francisco.
Continuing conversations that begin at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus where Deborah and I teach philosophy.
Today we're talking about James Baldwin and social justice.
Now, Deborah, I'm a big fan of Baldwin. He's a deep thinker, a searing social critic, and one of my favorite playwrights and novelists.
You know, I like Baldwin too, but I'm really bothered by his answer to what he calls the Negro problem.
Well, what bothers you?
Well, take the letter he wrote to his nephew. In that letter, Baldwin tells him not only that he has to accept white people, but that he has to accept them with love.
Love? That's what bothers you? You got something against love? I mean, come on, even thinking of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King also preached love and tolerance. Does King bother you too?
You know, King was deeply Christian and embraced a philosophy of Christian love, but Baldwin rejected Christianity, so I just don't get the appeal.
You think you need some excuse to love thine enemy, as Christ puts it?
I'm just saying you sometimes have to fight thine enemy, not just love thine enemy.
Well, it sounds like you want Baldwin to be, angrier or something. Is that it?
Well, why not? You know, it just doesn't make sense to me that he's not as angry. In the letter to his nephew, he also says that whites are innocent. How can he say that? Whites have been oppressing blacks. And oppressors aren't innocent, and they don't deserve love.
I think you're missing Baldwin's point. I think you're acting as if he's blind to the reality of white oppression, but he's not blind to white oppression.
But if he sees it, how can it make sense for him to say that whites are innocent? It's as if he thinks we're children who don't have responsibility for the harms we've been inflicting on black people.
No, I don't think that's right. I don't think he's trying to let whites off the hook. He thinks they're innocents because innocence is a kind of prison in his mind.
Ken, what does that even mean?
Well, Baldwin says this stuff about whites being trapped in history. And that means they've created this illusion of white supremacy, and they think of themselves as superior, as separate from the Negro. And segregation maintains that illusion. And that's why they're taught in a prison of illusion.
Okay, I get that. But why call it innocence? Aren't whites willfully self-deluded? After all, whites benefit from white supremacy.
It sounds like you really, really do want more anger from Baldwin. That seems what you want.
Well, I think that would be appropriate. Not love, but anger, righteous anger.
But see, I don't think you're getting what Baldwin exactly means by love. It's as if you're construing love as this kind of empty sentiment that lets people off the hook, that's all touchy-feely, forgiving. That's not how Baldwin sees it. Baldwin sees love as the core of a demanding, transformative project. That's how he sees love.
But why does that burden of transformation have to fall on black people?
But that's not what he's saying. He's not putting the burden on black people. That's why he says, I am not your Negro, Deborah.
Explain?
Well, look, in saying I am not your Negro, he's refusing to be the Negro that the white supremacist imagines. You know, the Negro incapable of love, that has no full agency. And with that act of defiance, because it is an act of defiance, he throws the burden of transformation right back on the white man. That's what he's doing.
Well, that sounds good, but I'm still bothered by the impression that Baldwin is letting whites off the hook. Why is the burden always on the oppressed to educate the oppressors about their own history? Why do blacks have to educate whites? Why do they have to free whites?
Well, this thing about burdens is important, and I do believe each of us has to shoulder our own burden, and some people have taken the burden upon themselves or are channeling Baldwin's message in their own work. So we sent our roving philosophical reporter, Holly J. McDeed, to find out more about the resurgence of Baldwin in the age of Black Lives Matter. She files this report.
More than 30 years since his death, James Baldwin's words have resurfaced in places like contemporary hip-hop, artwork, and movies. Take, for instance, the 2016 documentary, I Am Not Your Negro. In the film, Baldwin's prose is spoken by Samuel L. Jackson.
I had to accept as time wore on that part of my responsibility as a witness was to move as largely and as freely as possible, to write the story and to get it out.
The documentary is centered around Baldwin's writing, what it means to be black in America, and the importance of confronting the country's racist past.
To watch the TV screen for any length of time is to learn some really frightening things about the American sense of reality. We are cruelly trapped between what we would like to be and what we actually are.
Baldwin's work has also resonated with contemporary writers like Jamie McGee. She remembers reading Baldwin's work for the first time.
At first I was like, who's this random guy? He's so angry all the time. But then, very quickly I realized this guy is speaking truth, and nothing has really changed in the past 60 years since he began writing. Nothing's changed then up until now.
McGee co-founded a project called Praying with James Baldwin. Through 30 Days of Prayer, the project uses Baldwin's writing as a guide to help people navigate police brutality. The idea came after George Zimmerman was acquitted in the 2012 shooting death of Trayvon Martin.
A lot of times when I am faced with senseless violence, I don't have the words. I just sort of stare. And even if I'm praying, I don't really have the words. I'm like, God, and then ellipses, and I don't know how to end the sentence.
Baldwin grew up in the church, but later rejected it completely. But through his writing and through prayer, McGee hopes she can help people find the language they're looking for. One Day is based on Eric Garner's last words, I can't breathe. It also features excerpts from Baldwin's play, Blues for Mr. Charlie. In the scene, a woman tells her grandson that faith is not up to him.
It's up to the life in you that knows where it comes from, that believes in God. You doubt me, you just try holding your breath long enough to die.
Below that excerpt is a prayer written for the project.
It is not a desire to die that keeps Eric Garner from breathing, but the police officer's arm around his neck. It is the arms around all of our necks that keep us from breathing. It is the fear that our breath will be considered aggressive behavior and that if we open our mouths, an officer will fill it with bullets.
Police shootings like this one and the Black Lives Matter movement have propelled Baldwin into the mainstream. During his first year teaching high school students, Clint Smith also turned to Baldwin. Trayvon Martin had just been killed, but standardized testing left little room for teachers to talk about that.
How do we talk about Trayvon? Do we talk about Trayvon? How do we talk about Michael Brown? How do we talk about Eric Garner? How do we talk about the range of folks who have been killed at the hands of the state?
As he wrestled with these questions, another teacher gave Smith a speech by James Baldwin called A Talk to Teachers. Baldwin gave that speech soon after the Ku Klux Klan had bombed a church in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963, killing 4 girls.
I was just struck by how much of what Baldwin was writing about the role that teachers should play in creating a space for students to ask and wrestle with and navigate a world that is often filled with tragedy and despair.
After reading that speech, Smith focused less on standardized tests and more energy in using literature to help students understand the world they lived in, like using Shakespeare's Julius Caesar to talk about what it means to protest against the state.
I think Baldwin kind of, essentially he says that we should reject the false pretense of the classroom as an apolitical space, and your responsibility as a teacher is to help students understand how the world came to exist as it does.
Since Baldwin's death in 1987, prison populations have exploded. The wealth gap between black and white families has widened. Clint Smith says people are trying to provide solutions without understanding the history of the problem.
And that's a sort of central thesis of much of Baldwin's work, and that remains relevant as much today as it ever has been.
For Philosophy Talk, I'm Holly J. McDeed.
Thanks for that interesting piece on the continuing influence of Baldwin, Holly. I'm Ken Taylor. With me is my Stanford colleague, Deborah Satz, and today we're thinking about James Baldwin and social justice.
We're joined now by Christopher Freeburg. Christopher Freeburg is the Conrad Humanities Scholar and Professor of English at the University of Illinois, and he's also the author of Black Aesthetics in the Interior Life. Chris, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, Chris, as our roving philosophical reporter made clear, Baldwin seems to be enjoying something of a resurgence, probably in part due to the documentary I Am Not Your Negro from 2016. But I know you've been interested in Baldwin for some time now. So what was it about him that first captured your imagination?
Well, a long, long time ago, back in the Stone Ages, when I was in college at Xavier University of Louisiana, one of my good friends and mentors, Father Joseph Brown, used to teach Baldwin's essays, his plays and novels, and I thought it was really exciting the way he talked about it. But I actually never read it. I never read any of those.
Oh my God, Chris! I hope the father's not listening.
I've vigorously participated in conversations and hadn't read a thing. And it really wasn't until I became a professor, and I really missed his friendship and mentorship, and that I took to Baldwin again, and took to Baldwin for the first time. And realized that I had been learning about Baldwin all along through our friendship and his mentorship. So that's one of the reasons why Baldwin's special to me.
So, Chris, Ken and I were struggling in the opening to understand exactly what Baldwin means by love. Can you help us out?
Sure. I think Baldwin is when he talks about love, he wants to distinguish between a kind of a simple or infantile kind of idea of just love as happiness versus an idea about daring, passionate, and truthful relationships where you are willing to risk yourself to discover a new sense of your identity. And I think he finds that love is a vehicle for that.
Daring, passionate, and truthful. That sounds good. That sounds cool. But how does that help with racism and white supremacy? I'm not sure I get that. I mean, it's black people who are supposed to have this daring, passionate, and risky, I can't remember the third, truthful relationship to white people, right? But white people don't love us back, so how's that supposed to help?
Oh, I think absolutely. It's mostly for when Baldwin is writing this. I mean, well, he wrote this throughout his career, but especially in the late 50s and 60s, it was really for white people. He used to really condemn and criticize the kind of fantastical relationships, romance relationships in movies like The Postman Rings Twice. And so for Baldwin, it's the idea that whites had to be willing to confront how they dehumanized black people, and he thought that love relationships and intimacy would be a way
why
of
did he think
that.
But why did he write to his nephew that you have to love, the white man? I get that you might want to tell the person who's oppressing you to recognize the humanity and love the oppressed. But why should the oppressed love the oppressor? I still don't fully understand what's behind that.
Yes, I would probably see that as an opening or a vehicle for a change of everyone's identity who's involved. And I think that's what is Baldwin called for. One of the things he always says is that whites and blacks, but especially whites, need to have the courage to see their connectedness and to work out their salvation together.
Okay, this sounds like a complicated multivariate equation, and we're going to have to dig into this complicated equation after a short break. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today, we're thinking about James Baldwin with Christopher Freeburg from the University of Illinois.
In the next segment, we'll talk about why Baldwin thinks it's so important to tell the truth. How can the truth set us free from what he calls the traps of history?
Truth, history, and freedom, plus your calls and emails when Philosophy Talk continues.
If you was white, you'd be all right. If you was brown, you stick around. But as you black, oh brother, get back, get back, get back.
Trapped by the color of your skin? We're talking about race and justice. I'm Ken Taylor. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Deborah Satz, and we're talking about the life and thought of James Baldwin. Our guest today is Christopher Freeburg from the University of Illinois. He's the author of Black Aesthetics and the Interior Life.
Chris, I want to think about this phrase, trapped in history. This seems to figure a lot in what Baldwin thinks about the relations between blacks and whites in America. What exactly does he mean by that phrase?
Well, I think at the core of the phrase trapped in history is the concept of dehumanization, that whites had constructed a society and a way of belief, a sense of reality that blacks were inferior and disconnected. And he felt that was a trap, that if you could not understand that or recognize that truth that about racial segregation, inferiority, and disconnection, then you couldn't really be liberated in a democratic society.
Well, so
that was for whites.
So that's for whites, right? But so, I mean, why is it the whites who are trapped? Rather, I would think, I mean, one might think was the blacks who are trapped by white engagement, right? But whites do this engagement of blacks freely. How does the cage turn on the, it turns back on the encager or something? I mean, what's going on there? Why is it whites who are in any sense trapped?
I think it's Baldwin just insisted that if white people needed the Negro, needed the nigger in his own phrasing, then they had to morally confront why they needed that reality. And that he kept insisting on that people have the courage to ask and address that question. What was the need for the dehumanization and the separation when socially, even though they're unequal, that they were connected.
Okay, so I get that. I think I want to understand more about the role truth is supposed to play, though, in the liberatory project, and especially truth about the past. Because what do you say to the person who says, look, forget the past. Whites are, they're never going to agree about what they've done in the past. Let's just kind of go forward now as equal, respecting citizens. What do you say to the person who says, I'm not trapped by history. I just want to live my life?
Well, I'd probably say from Baldwin's perspective, always addressing the horrors, the trauma, the truth of what happened in history is just a matter of confronting and realizing truth and what made society the way that it is today. And facing it doesn't necessarily mean blaming somebody else, blaming contemporary society for that, but it means just at least recognition and having the courage to recognize it. I think Baldwin's always after this idea of having courage, having moral bravery to face something, even if we disagree about it.
Yeah, I want to take you a step back. Deborah said she gets the thing about why whites are trapped in history. I think I get it, but I'm not sure I do. I don't know if Baldwin read or studied Hegel. It sounds a little Hegelian. That is, there's this master-slave dialectic such that the master thinks of himself as free, but actually the master depends on his status as master for the slave, on the slave. So he's more of a dependent creature than he realizes that he doesn't understand his own full nature. Is something like that going on in Baldwin? I mean, the whites don't fully see themselves because of because they don't see their full dependency of their status as superior to this thing that they do to black people or something like that.
And absolutely, but Baldwin would also add to that is its own dehumanizing force, that whites are dehumanized themselves in the act of dehumanizing or degrading other people, bringing other people down.
But it's not symmetrical. I mean, so what I kind of object to is the idea that the positions of oppressed and oppressor, even if they both need each other, are somehow symmetrical. I mean, one has really got their foot on the other person's, neck.
Yeah. But I think I don't know, Chris. What do you think about what Deborah just said there?
Well, I'd probably say I don't think Baldwin would suggest at all that they were symmetrical. But the idea is that the person who's doing the oppressing would need to recognize why they're doing it, and therein the solution lies. If the people who have the power are the ones that need the change.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he constantly keeps putting the question back onto whites.
Right, but I think even if it's not symmetrical, I think of Baldwin, tell me if this is a bad analogy. I think of Baldwin as looking at America the way a therapist might look at a really dysfunctional family. And the kids are saying, the parents have done this and that to me, and the parents are saying, you kids just can't, and the parents have more power, no doubt about it, right? And perhaps they are more responsible than the kids are. But in this dysfunctional family, if you're going to heal this family, you can't just treat the parents. You got to treat all of them. They all have to find a new way of being together, and they're all involved in that. I mean, so that it's not just get your foot off of me, right? And that's the solution. Does that seem plausible or not?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd say that one of the things, I've been watching a lot of more Baldwin's interviews from the 60s all the way through the 80s, and one of the things he constantly comes back to is this concept of working together in the most truthful way, but that also requires one's recognition of their complicity about the past and the problems that we currently face.
So, there's this scene in the comic strip Charlie Brown where, Charlie Brown, Lucy says, trust me, love me, work together with me. And every time, she holds up a football for him to kick and she pulls it away at the last minute and he falls. And he does it over and over again. And does it make sense to ask at some point this project of going on together, noble as it is, it's just not working?
Well, I'd probably say that there's no other, according to Baldwin, there's no other choice. So, in that, I'd probably say it sounds, his work. I mean, some of the ways that we're discussing it sounds a little bit naive of him, but in his fictional work and in his essays, it's always terrifying and traumatic, these changes. I mean, what he expects, the possibilities of transformation are always rough. Mm-hmm. There's no easy way about it. And so I think in other words, your skepticism is rightly placed in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about James Baldwin, and we've got a caller on the line, Ken Johnson, editor of the journal Telos, calling from Sacramento. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Ken, and thanks for publishing my article on Martin Luther King.
Thank you. We're looking forward to it. March 2018 in better bookstores. So
awesome.
I thought I would offer to your speakers here, I think what Baldwin was trying to express was the Christian notion of agape, the idea of the transforming of the other, and along with the notions of truth, you can have those truthful conversations. And I think it is something where, because of his upbringing in the black church tradition, even though he later became an atheist, Baldwin could not escape this, which is also why his prose just sings, because it comes from the Bible. And this notion of agape, of seeking the interest and the transformation of the other, is really the only way out. I also would maybe more controversially suggest that this is also one reason why many of the left progressives are failing. The social justice warriors are failing to reach people.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough love there.
Yeah.
And they're not seeking the true transformation of the other, but prefer coercion instead.
Ken, thanks a lot for the call. Chris, I want to ask you, that sounds like Baldwin, despite himself, he's that good old Christian boy that his parents raised at his deep core, and that's why it's similar in certain ways to Martin Luther King. Even though one's an atheist, they got the same kind of consciousness at the bottom. What do you think about that thought?
I think so. I think it's I think at least partially. I think Baldwin he was a preacher. Even though I'm a huge person, I'm not a huge Baldwin in terms of his biography, but he was a preacher when he was in high school, and I think that he always considered himself a Jeremiah, and that tradition in many ways rhetorically at least stayed with him. And I think philosophically, absolutely, the idea of morality and love and transformation of the oppressor stayed central. But I do think that it was always a mutually related sense of transformation. That if it's true that white supremacy corrupts us all, then we have to all be involved as part of the transformation. Just one last note. I'm not sure. I think I would put in terms of his religious affiliation. I know he left the church and he rejected certain forms of Christianity. I wasn't sure that. I mean, I think the jury's out on whether he was an atheist altogether. I think there's a lot more questions around answers than that, but I'm not sure if that affects our conversation.
Yeah, so I'm going to push back a little bit on the idea that that Baldwin's concept of love is just like Martin Luther King's. Actually, the way you're describing it as this transformative project, it's not about just turning the other cheek or loving us all because we're creatures in God's eyes and we have an innate humanity. It's about we have to make ourselves worthy, that of going on together. And it's as you say, demanding project. So that doesn't seem...
I think you're underselling Martin Luther King, though, there. I'm not sure you're overselling Baldwin, but I think you're underselling Martin Luther King. Because Martin Luther King thought, the arc of the universe bends slowly toward justice, but human action, the human work in it, God urgently calls us to do this work, and this work is really, really hard.
I agree with all that, but I just think the concepts of love are somewhat different.
So what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think another difference is that I think that King probably had more faith in the legislative, the idea of legislation and the body politic, where Baldwin seemed to be had much more faith in the concept of or in the necessity of moral transformation, rather than legal. He always said that.
I got this from reading some of your stuff and a few other things. He seemed to be much more, in some sense, apolitical. That he did not think politics and what you can achieve through politics is nearly sufficient to address this thing, and he didn't even seem to believe that politics. And he seemed to believe in something, what I would call the ineptitude of politics to this problem, or the inadequacy of politics to this problem. Am I reading that right, or not?
Well, I think he said something. One of the things he said in one of these interviews was, I think it was with Kenneth Clark. He said that they as in whites didn't enforce the 15th Amendment. Now we have a current civil rights bill in the 60s. Why do you think they're going to enforce that either? And so he was skeptical, I think, not of the ideas that are in the laws and where they came from, but the idea of actual practicing it.
Yeah.
It didn't mean anything that people practice.
So we've got a caller on the air, Lisa from San Francisco. Welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Thank you so much. You guys, as always, have a really good program. I wanted to mention and remind people about Ernesto Che Guevara's quote about love. At the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality. And also, I want to mention something else, that I think that maybe Baldwin's letter to his nephew tells him to love white people because for self-preservation, because hate can kill. Besides the fact that black people have been oppressed and that kills as well. The hate inside can kill as well, and maybe that was a way of loving his nephew and helping him.
Yeah,
that seems like a really important point. And as I recall, Baldwin was very concerned about his own father's life, and thought his father had died by being eaten up inside by his own self-hatred and his hatred of white society, and it was actually bad for him.
Yes.
To carry that hate and anger around.
Thanks for the call. Thanks for the call, Lisa. And so Chris, you have a thought about that before we?
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things that when Baldwin, before he left to live in Paris, he said that he was so eaten up by bitterness against America by his own, because of the way America treated him, that he was going to either kill himself or kill somebody else. And he said in Paris he was allowed to vomit that up and have his own new identity. So that was crucial.
So, but we recently did a show on Fanon, who has a very much an opposite. He would take that anger and say that anger shows that the oppressor and the oppressed cannot coexist, and that the oppressed will not be free until the oppressor's world is eliminated, is totally crushed. Did Baldwin ever have a thought like that, of the Fanon type, or would he just have recoil? I don't know if he ever encountered Fanon. If they ever, they were rough contemporaries. Did he ever have a thought like that?
Well, he definitely warned us that if the necessary moral transformation that he called for was not going to happen, that he said the fire next time. He said that's why when he talked about in one of the speech he gave to a group of students in London, he said the reason, if we can't face the fact that we're a brother and sister, or we can't face the truth when people watch their own brothers lynched, if we can't face that, then that's why Detroit's burning right now.
Right.
So
love is the alternative to the Fanon's fire, right? And if you don't do love, you got the fire. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're thinking about the life and thought of James Baldwin with Christopher Freeburg from the University of Illinois.
What would Baldwin have to say about today's social and racial justice movements? Is Baldwin's message still relevant for activists in the 21st century?
Justice, activism, and transformation when Philosophy Talk continues.
Jordan endorsements or watch BET cause urban support is important. So why did I weep when Trayvon Martin was in the street? When gang banging make me kill a nigga blacker than me? Hypocrite.
In today's America, even successful black people like Kendrick Lamar can still feel irrelevant due to our lack of racial justice. Sad commentary. I'm Ken Taylor, and this is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Deborah Satz, and our guest is Christopher Freeburg from the University of Illinois. He's the author of Black Aesthetics and the Interior Life.
And we've got a caller, Michelle from San Francisco, is on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk. Michelle, what's your comment or question?
Oh, yes. I was, Baldwin was not just black, he was gay. And that's another persecuted minority, especially in those days, and which kind of encompasses all races. And I remember reading a long time ago a novel called Giovanni's Room, which happens in Italy, and it's about two men and a woman, and the two men have an affair. I was wondering, if your guest could perhaps talk about this intersectionality of race and sexuality.
Yeah,
in Baldwin.
I know he can because he does it in his book that I've read recently.
Okay.
so Chris, what do you want to say to that?
I think the caller raises a very important question about Baldwin's overall relevance to intersectionality, questions about race, sexuality, and identity. And I think one of the things that Baldwin says corresponds or underscores David, this is the character in Giovanni's Room, and his relationship with his fiancée Helga, and the man he loves, Giovanni, is that he refuses to face the truth about that, and he hides it in the room, and so that's partly so the moral question of his ability to talk about or face truth and actually embrace the love that he has and also face the consequences of not telling the truth or not relating to that truth. I think is a crucial part of Baldwin's corpus.
So our caller just referred to back then. And you could think Baldwin is a dude of the 60s, a different era of struggle. So if you're an activist for justice now, what can you find? What can you take for now, right, from Baldwin? And our earlier caller, just to remind people, our earlier caller, Ken Johnson, said that he saw some implicit criticism of social justice, today's social justice activists in Baldwin, because they don't focus on love enough. Do you agree with that, or what?
Well, what I was really interested. There's I guess a new book coming out by Patrice Nichols called "When They Call You a Terrorist," and she's one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'd probably say that there's two aspects that when she was recently talking about this book at the New York Public Library, and one of the things I think that Baldwin would be not very interested in, but he would clap his hands about, is the transformation of the legal system, of legalizing marijuana and the changes in incarceration laws and that type of social victory. But one of the things that she was saying was crucial to her understanding about race today was the idea that we need to listen to each other more and accept our sense of vulnerability to one another and how we're subject to one another within races and across races. And I thought that was very profound and something that would definitely appear in Baldwin were writing today in his essays or his fiction.
So if somebody thinks that, this is all well and good, but this is a kind of, Ken used the model of a dysfunctional family. It's a therapeutic model of politics as opposed to a strategic, tactical, think about where the centers of power are and building alliances that are, just strategic. Love doesn't, therapy isn't going to change the institutional structures that we, are oppressing people.
I think that Baldwin would say that those institutions are made up of people. I hear your point totally, but I think that he would say those institutions are made up of people. The state, the kind of great canvas that we call white supremacy, is made up of individuals, and those individuals have problems and relationships. And I think that that's what the balance between his essays and his fiction.
So I want to respond to that too, because it seems I'm no Baldwin expert, and it's been a long time since I thought deeply about Baldwin. But preparing for this show and reading his stuff made me think, and I actually think there's something really powerful there. And I do think maybe it's a criticism. There is an implied criticism of current social justice kind of approaches, because Baldwin does not think social justice, racial justice is going to leave any of us as we are, right? Any of us with fixed identities. All these identities are tied up with this mess that we're in. Current identity politics and social justice aspirations seem to think, well, the oppressor has to change. But I don't really have to change. You just have to get off my back, and let me be. You have to listen to me and all this. And it's not so much we have to talk together about a new world together in which all of us may be reconfigured, root and branch. But Baldwin seems to think, you know what? America needs to be reconfigured, root and branch, the oppressed as much as the oppressor. And we can only participate in this root and branch reconfiguration together. I don't think that's the thought behind current social justice movements. What do you think?
Well, I just say the idea of sacrifice and the question of what are we, I think, locally, individually, collectively, going to have to give up to get to a new place is crucial. And everybody has to have some type of skin in the game. As unfair as it sounds, I think there's a cruelness in this idea of love and danger that means everybody has to be in and has some skin in the game. And that's, it definitely seems asymmetrical and unfair, but I think that's part of it.
Okay, we've got a comment from Joan in San Francisco, who writes kind of critically claiming that we're having too much of a ivory tower conversation that's sort of making Baldwin seem too nice and not incendiary enough. And she mentions Baldwin talking about Harlem poverty next to advertisements for $3,000 bracelets in the New Yorker in 1963, and just how radical and inflammatory that was. And so the kind of therapeutic approach really misses the kind of power of this argument.
What do you think about that, Chris?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily go with with either the terms the therapeutic, but I do think that Baldwin's insistence on danger in terms of having the one's willingness to danger and terror in terms of social transformation was crucial, and I don't think there's no way of underestimating that. No, what is it actually? When any of us go through a dramatic change, most of it at some level has to go through some sense of violence. whether, and so I think that was always a part of Baldwin's work. So I don't want to de-emphasize that, but it was definitely very much about the interior life as a relationship to the exterior life for Baldwin.
And look,
I don't know if that's too ivory tower, but
no, I don't think it's ivory tower at all, John. I'm going to push back. I don't think we're being ivory tower at all. And then when I brought in the therapeutic thing, and I said it's more like a therapist looking at a dysfunctional family. I don't know if Baldwin thought of himself as therapeutic, but I do think, a dysfunctional family needs to reconstitute itself together. It needs to reconstitute itself together, and that is really hard work, which will leave none of them as they were before. So all the morally aggrieved and the morally aggressive, none of them will be as they were before.
So here's a question for both of you then. What if a social movement is to be guided by this idea, what should it be doing that it's not doing today?
That's a good question. Chris, you got a thought? I'm going to throw that one to you. I'm Duncan. I'm the host.
Well, I think that Baldwin in some ways would duck it too, because he would go. I think because one thing I seem to notice, this one great interview that was done by Larry Schwab at Hampshire College, and in the 80s is asking him precisely these more political prescription questions, and Baldwin, you can tell, is not, I'm exaggerating here, but hostile to the questions.
Yeah.
He keeps going back to this idea of moral transformation, encourage the idea of facing crucial questions like, what is my role in what is from a white person's perspective, what is my role and I think it would be relevant to what is my role in dehumanizing other people. And I think that was the thing that he just kept going back to that question, because he felt like that people don't take that seriously enough.
So look, I think this ducking the question, it may sound like hard. I think it points to something profound, right? People constituting a life together from scratch out of the ruins that that history has left them, right? When they finally throw off this history and escape from this trap, this is the hardest thing that humans do. There are many semi-successful experiments, many failed experiments. And if you're looking for some formula that's going to guarantee you some success, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a formula. We face real questions in our society, real issues of racial justice, from the high incarceration rates of African American males to the wealth disparities to employment disparities. We need some way to think about building a movement to address that.
I agree, but change the law, for example. Have the Supreme Court strike down segregation. And has that solved your problem? Okay, every prescription like that, focus on this law, that law. Has that solved your problem? Right? No, you're still left with this war of the heart. And how do you fight that war of the heart? Change the law? No, it's really hard. The work of changing the heart is really, really hard. Do you agree or disagree, Chris? Your last thought.
Well, I agree with that. I think that one thing I would say about current Black Lives Matter movement in Baldwin, I think Baldwin would be inspired in many ways, because he talked about he always talked about learning from the youth and learning from the radical positions of the youth. And so I think that he would be inspired by in other words, of course, he'd probably have his critiques, but he'd also, like I said, be inspired by what Black Lives Matter is doing, and in terms of their in terms of what they're doing.
So, Chris, on that inspiring note of optimism, I'm going to thank you for joining. This has been a great conversation, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, Chris, it's great.
Pleasure to be here.
So our guest has been Christopher Freeburg. He's a professor of English at the University of Illinois, author of Black Aesthetics and the Interior Life. So, Deborah, you got a thought here? You have lots of thoughts, but a closing thought?
Yeah, I actually do buy some of the argument about the transformative project, and I think about things like the black troops during the Civil War who fought for a country that was denying them citizenship in unbelievably heroic ways. And there is a way in which that resonates with I'm Not Your Negro, that they're throwing up a kind of self-sacrifice for this project that is a problematic project, but they're showing that there's a better way to do it.
Well, exactly. And one of the things I say to students is that making and remaking and unmaking the social world is the hardest thing that humans do. And one of the things I say we're inviting them to be as educated, engaged citizens is help us remake the social world, unmake the old order, remake the new order. But this stuff is hard. But you know what? It takes conversation, and this conversation continues at Philosophers Corner, at our online community of thinkers. Thinkers, where our motto is, get this, cogito ergo blogo. I think, therefore I blog. And you can become a partner in that community just by visiting our website, philosophytalk.org.
And if you have a question that wasn't addressed in today's show, maybe, we'd love to hear from you. So send your question to us at comments@philosophytalk.org, and we might feature it on the blog. And now, let's hear from someone trapped by a history of his own fast talking. It's Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes. There was a renewed interest in James Baldwin with the release of the documentary I Am Not Your Negro, based on Baldwin's work, unfinished at his death, Remember This House, reminiscences of his friends Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Medgar Evers, all black, all murdered. As a very talented young man, self-exiled to France, Baldwin got famous pretty fast, shooting back and forth across the Atlantic. His renown entangled with what were called at the time civil rights, but he seemed to view more as a question of a nation getting a soul and heart for once in its damn life. In 1963, young Baldwin was found relevant in what passed for public discourse, that is, him and William F. Buckley swapping words of many syllables in windowless rooms. Then they just started piling up, Black Panthers sprang up, Vietnam and whatnot, and America being America, its racism and self-examination always impeded by impatience and the aforementioned lack of soul, wants to talk about this stuff, really does. But do we want to talk about it with this pre-1963 guy, or should we get Eldridge Cleaver or some other post-1963 black person in the mix now to frown at him for carrying a loaded weapon? Because, that's scaring up Madge. Doesn't that just make the situation worse? James Baldwin, a bit uncomfortable in the role of preacher, stuck to his virtual guns of being a writer. In his words, quote, when you are standing in the pulpit, you must sound as though you know what you're talking about. Writing for me is finding out what you don't want to know, what you don't want to find out, unquote. Come the 70s, Baldwin dropped his idea to bring the autobiography of Malcolm X to the screen. His closest friend and mentor had just had a total breakdown. His trusted agent had died, leaving him in charge of her 2 young children. Plus, he was in a new relationship with an Italian painter who also had 2 children. Eldridge Cleaver, then a fugitive, was trying to hit him up for $10,000. A lot of stuff on his emotional plate. But in 1973, he put together an evening. Him, Cicely Tyson, who just won an Oscar for Sounder, 2 other actors, one his brother and his friend Ray Charles, with orchestra, and the Raylettes for a concert at Carnegie Hall. At the time, the show, called the Hallelujah Chorus, was considered a flop and was soon forgotten. Who knows why? Baldwin had been around a long time now, saying the same old thing. We still had racism, so what good was he? If he can't fix this, let's change the subject. We're America. This is long before the Twitter, but some of the responses were remarkably nasty. Melody Maker's Richard Williams observed, quote, Baldwin blew a good chance to create something worthwhile with his faggoty mannerisms, both literary and personal, unquote. Meow. Dance critic Whitney Balliet wrote that Charles and Baldwin, quote, in the end have little in common. Charles remains a canny, tough Pinewoods primitive, and Baldwin is a delicate urban visionary, unquote. Now, here from the vantage of Me Too and Black Lives Matter and gender equality and gay rights and trying to ignore the president if we can, it looks to me like this show harkened back to the era of Chautauqua and old-school revival meetings combining theater, oratory, and music to work out taboos and divisions, to disrupt the patterns of the psychological violence inherent in preserving the fictions of rancid division. Be present, America, Baldwin was saying. Here's how. A gay black man, a blind black man doing their thing, talking, singing, bringing us together with heartfelt soul and heartfelt ambivalence. Baldwin wrote, quote, I have observed that not many of us can say or sing hallelujah. Perhaps it is because one must first descend into the valley where one learns to say amen. If one can find in oneself the force to say amen, it is possible to come to hallelujah, but amen is the price, unquote. Baldwin wanted to offer a way to say amen to something in this nasty world, and we may yet learn. Still, if we don't earn an epiphany, at least we'll still have the music of Ray Charles and the hard words of James Baldwin. I gotta go.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of KALW Local Public Radio San Francisco and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2018.
Our executive producers are David Demarest and Matt Martin.
The senior producer is Devin Strolovich. Laura McGuire is our director of research. Cindy Prince-Baum is our director of marketing.
Thanks also to Merle Kessler, Carola Kreitmeyer, Angela Johnston, and Colin Peden.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from various groups at Stanford University and from the partners in our online community of thinkers.
The views expressed or misexpressed on the program don't necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or any of our other funders.
Not even when they're true and reasonable.
The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org, where you too can become a partner in our community of thinkers. I'm Deborah Satz.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
I just want to say that I am not a racist. I don't even see race, not even my own. People tell me I'm white, and I believe them because I just devoted 6 minutes to explaining how I'm not a racist.